Всем привет, меня зовут Cinebaro3. Before we start, I feel like I need to clarify for some of the wee lads and lasses that happen to be in my audience. The community is not making fun of Lupisvulpes because she is a Christian. We are making fun of her because she refuses to take accountability for her action, let alone acknowledge her actions, and instead hid behind her Christianity when everyone got mad at her. This video won't be discussing that situation, but I felt like bringing it up for a moment. When that whole debacle went down, I heard from a few videos that Lupus was known for making a pilot, which I had seen the thumbnail for, but was never able to finish watching, because the first 4 minutes was so overwhelming to me, I just dipped like each time. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the audience pilot. Audience has only been a pilot as far as I know, so that's all I'm really going to be talking about. Now, it took me 3 different tries to watch it all the way through, just because it's so overstimulating. I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute, but let's break down what happens in this video. The video starts off with a theme song and intro sequence, which introduces us to the characters and their names. Not much else should be expected, in my opinion. The animation is fine, it's cute, it's acceptable, if not a bit stiff. But I'm pretty sure Lupus was in middle school when they made this, so I'm not gonna harp on that too much. The song is fine too. It's got a chill, sitting around a bonfire by the beach vibe to it. I like the song. Once that's over, the actual episode begins, with a dream sequence. Already I hate this. I hate dream sequences. Starting off the episode with one is awful. Unless it contains information that we need to drive the story forward, like introducing a vital character, or maybe exploring a character's trauma or past through a dream, or even predicting future events. The dream sequence is useless and shouldn't be in the episode. It's padding, and you want to stay as far away from padding as possible when writing a story. Litho is the one having this dream. He's abruptly woken up by Mags, and she asks where Mingu is. He doesn't know where Mingu is, so she goes away looking for him. And then Mingu shows up like right after she leaves. Instead of calling for her to come back, because she couldn't have gotten that far based on the time it took for him to get there, they both chat. Mingu doesn't speak English for some reason, and there aren't any subtitles for him, so I don't know what's going on or why there's multicolored shards in his legs. Ryder comes in, and he says there's something wrong with X, and then X shows up talking about a parade. Ryder says something about X destroying his island, and then King OxyClean comes in and he sings a little ditty for us. If you're confused, it's okay, I am too. These are already a lot of characters to keep track of. This is normally the part where I just dip and stop watching it, because I can't handle the amount of things going on. But wait, it gets worse! Apparently Ryder can speak whatever Mingu speaks and translates for him. Mingu says Litho destroyed his home with some gems. I'm guessing that's what's in his legs. Surely there's a reason 2 different homes were being destroyed at the same time, so they go to a portal opening? I don't know what's going on. They're expecting someone to come out of the portal. I don't know why this would help with the homes being destroyed, but someone does come out. His name is Showtime, and he wants the cast to join a parade, or party, I don't know. They kinda just use those words interchangeably. I guess X and Showtime know each other. Showtime hypnotizes everyone, so they'll come to his party parade, except for Litho, who's immune to it for some reason. Showtime then sings a song about why he's a bad guy, and then the portal explodes, and yet another character comes out! Little side note here, I'm not sure if I like the fact that they're calling these darkies. That's kind of weird. Showtime takes all his hypnotized friends away to take him to the Nightmare Parade, and then we get...
all the darkies can just, track each other, right?
That's cool. No, it's not. So this character's name is Toonie, and they also can't speak English. Instead, they speak with an array of computer-generated noises. It's kinda interesting, I guess. Toonie takes Litho to the parade party, and it turns out the parade leads into a pit of spikes, which Showtime is making them march into. At least I think that's marching. Toonie is scared, and in response, he crushes Showtime with a piano. As you do. Toonie takes him to a cave, and when he wakes up, he asks Toonie to sign a contract with him, to make him evil. And in return, Showtime gives Toonie a voice. And then the episode ends. That was kinda terrible. Let me go over why. I'll start with the most obvious. There are way too many characters being introduced in this pilot, and we don't get a lot of time to learn about any of them. Litho seems to be the voice of reason. Nervous little bitty boy. Showtime is the bad guy, and I guess X and Toonie are also bad. Ryder is a ghost, but that's all I really picked up. King Oxford University is probably drunk, and he disappears right after he sings a song. Mingu is dead and speaks a foreign language, and Mags is dead. I don't know where Mags went. She went off screen and died. That is 8 characters we are expected to keep track of. Not including the 2 dudes from Litho's dream, and everyone from the party parade. Can you Pick a word, please! Even Lupus couldn't keep track of them all. Mags and the King Dude show up at the beginning, but then they disappear. Also, each character has a lot of detail on them. They look like they would have been a pain to animate. As well as, it just doesn't really look good. Like, when Showtime in particular was moving around, a lot of the details on their fur blended together and made it look weird. I don't really care for it, honestly. It makes it a bit hard to tell what's happening, like what position they're in, where their appendages are. It just looks a bit cluttered. I feel like Lupus would have benefited from simplifying the designs of the characters, especially for animation purposes, because if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure they made this by themselves. So you just give yourself a lot of work. A lot of the characters that were introduced in this pilot didn't have a lot of bearing on the story. They were very inconsequential, especially the two ones I mentioned that just disappeared. And also the weird bit about the homes being destroyed wasn't really necessary because we never touch upon that. It's brought up at the beginning, but it's never resolved. Speaking of islands and homes, that brings me to my next point. Audience takes a weird approach to explaining its world, which is to say they don't explain it at all. There are kingdoms, there are forests, there's a giant portal in the sky, and there's a big party on a cliff. That's really all we get. Normally when your story takes place in a fictional world, you find ways to explain the rules through circumstance. There are many different ways to approach this. For example, in My Little Pony, Twilight Sparkle, the main character, is sent to a town she's never been to. She doesn't know a lot of the customs there, so they are often explained to her from episode to episode. This also works with other ponies, simply not knowing about equestrian geography, other species, traditions, history, and so whenever it's brought up, it gets explained. This is what's known as a fish out of water scenario. Taking a character who has never been in this fictional world and putting them there, so that we, the audience, learn about this world with this character. Another example would be something like Beastars, which takes place in a world where anthropomorphic animals coexist, but just barely, because carnivores and herbivores are extremely prejudiced toward each other. The story is narrated by the main character Legoshi, and we see everything from his perspective, at least when he's on screen. With this, we get to see his thought process, how he views other students at his school, and when certain things pop up, he'll explain it to us. More notably, complaining about it. Only really when it's necessary, though. The prejudice between carnivores and herbivores is something we see played out, so Legoshi doesn't need to explain it. But when the subject comes up, we get to hear how he feels. There's a scene in the cafeteria where Legoshi explains that all the meat served in the cafeteria is plant-based. So while there are a bunch of carnivores in his school, none of them are eating real meat. Personally, I don't like when shows and movies have narrators, but I think it's kinda helpful when it's from the perspective of someone we're watching in the show. There are other subtler ways that you can go about this. I can't really think of any other examples. Audience treats us like we already understood the world prior to watching, which may be the case for some, but clearly not everyone understood the rules of this world. I think more time should have been put into giving us background information on this world. Like the portal. I don't understand it at all. One of the characters mentions it and then they go there. That's obnoxious. Especially so since this is a vital part of the story. 2 characters end up coming out of this portal. This is where the main villain comes from. And also, speaking of the villains, why are they called darkies? I'm pretty sure she changed it recently to a different name, but I couldn't find out what the new name was. But that's what I've heard. So at least as of late, it's not an issue. But it's definitely an issue with this video. I don't know a lot about these characters, but I'm pretty sure X is also a darkie, and so is Showtime and Toonie. And they're all perceived as bad guys. It's a bit sus, for sure. But I'm not gonna harp on that too much because, again, as far as I know, the name was changed. But I wanted to bring it up because it is in the pilot. I've been studying storytelling for a while, so I've picked up some things to look out for and avoid. I'm not an expert by any means, but I'd like to offer what I know. If I were to try to make this pilot into a better rendition, then I would have to break down the very concept of what this episode is about. In order to cut out unneeded information, like the islands being destroyed, because it's never brought up again, we cut down to the bare essence of what is happening. Litho is the protagonist, Showtime is the villain. Ryder and Mingu are the points of interest, and or what is being threatened by the villain. I would only include these characters in this episode. The episode is about Showtime coming through the portal, so this would be the episode he's introduced in. Showtime has a parade, including many other characters, which can be there, but they're going to be limited strictly to being background characters. The conflict is that Showtime plans on killing the participants of the parade by making them march off of a cliff. We have the span of 1 episode to deal with this conflict. That is all we need to make this work. So, if I were to rewrite this episode, then this would be my take. We would first start off with a few establishing shots of where the characters are. They're in a forest, so they're mostly going to comprise of calm woods, maybe some wildlife, and lastly, the portal, which may be shown existing, but acting dormant, as if it's open, yet inactive. Follow this with the portal suddenly acting as if it's glitching or something, to sort of make it clear to the audience that something is wrong. We would then cut to Litho, who is not sleeping, and is instead hanging out with his two friends Mingu and Ryder. They're talking to each other when they start either hearing weird noises, or notice strange things happening to the animals or the trees. Perhaps the portal is scaring the wildlife, therefore they're all running from it. Or the portal being active is causing irregular wind patterns or colors in the grass and trees. Or maybe it's emitting a smell that only ever comes from the portal when someone's trying to come through it. Litho and his friends notice this, and assume it's because of the portal, so they go to investigate. When they find said portal, they wait in anticipation, because they don't know if it's another one of their kind coming through, if they're a friend or a foe. They must be prepared for anything. All of a sudden, confetti comes out of the portal, and then Showtime comes out. He introduces himself, and everyone greets him and welcomes him to their world. Perhaps they show him around the forest and introduce him to the world's rules, maybe take this opportunity to explain the portal, in response to Showtime not understanding why they knew he was coming through it. During all this, Showtime is behaving very strange, very suspicious, like he's plotting something. They finish the tour and offer their friendship, and Showtime is so moved by their kindness that he wants to plan something that they can participate in. So he plans a party. He invites everyone, including Litho, Ryder, and Mingu. Ryder and Mingu want to join, but Litho is skeptical because of Showtime's mannerisms during the tour. He advises his friends against it, and though they want to, they understand Litho is just being concerned for their safety. Instead of getting hypnotized right away, they assure Litho that he's simply overreacting. And if anything happens, they'll be safe if they go together. And so they do go together. They have a gay old time at this party, except Litho, who is cautiously watching over everyone from the sidelines. The party ends with a parade. Showtime is the majorette who leads the guests as they march off into the unknown. Litho remains to the side, following slightly farther ahead than his friends, because he wants to get a better understanding of where the parade ends. Turns out it ends at a cliff. Showtime has wings, so when it comes to this point, he hovers above the ground until he reaches the end. Litho runs out and screams to warn the others, only to realize they can't hear him. They've all been hypnotized along the way to the cliff. By the time Litho realizes this, people are growing closer and closer to the edge. Showtime remains at the side of the river of people walking toward their doom. Litho is terrified, yelling out to his friends, but to no avail. He tries holding them back, but their will is too great. He doesn't know how to stop everyone, but he has to do it fast. He runs up to Showtime and tells him to stop, but he doesn't want to comply. He wants to see everyone die. Depending on the tone that Lupus was going for, some of the first participants could have already fallen over and died, only to set up the danger that they're all really in. Out of pure desperation, frustration, and care for his friends, he runs at Showtime and tackles him over the edge of the cliff. The camera doesn't follow them. There's the sounds of punches being thrown, yelling, screaming, and then there's a loud thud once they both hit the bottom. We cut back to the crowd, and they are slowly coming back to their senses. They realize what's happening. Some a little too late. Some of them did see what happened, but now that they're not entranced anymore, they look over the edge to see if Litho made it. And because he's the main character, he does make it. He's at the bottom, alive, on top of Showtime. He won, and while it was still at the cost of some of his neighbors, they all consider it a victory. Litho is declared a hero for saving everyone from Showtime, and his friends have a greater respect for him. And when we think the episode is over, the camera goes back to Showtime, and it reveals that he never actually died. He was simply knocked out. And he's coming back. He's coming for Litho. And that's my take on this episode. What did you guys think? Do you prefer the version I wrote? Would you have rather stick to the original? Is there something you think I missed? If you would be so inclined, you can leave a comment telling me your opinions, or even your own interpretation of the episode. In all honesty though, Lupus did make a pilot, and that's more pilots than I've ever made. She also made this when she was in middle school, so I can't harp on her too much for the quality. I'm simply reviewing it as a product. The product was bad, but for her age at the time, it was excusable. Now, this isn't to discourage young artists who want to write their own stories. By all means, go ahead. Write whatever you want to your heart's content. As long as it isn't harmful, you can kinda just do whatever you want. Your work right now probably isn't going to be good, but if you keep trying, then it will. Just look at me, just look at the things I've done. Look at the storytelling I used to do, and look at me now. If you really want to write good stories that keep people invested and gains you an audience, you can do that. but it will take time, and that's really all I want you to keep in mind. Once again, however, I want to bring up that Lupisvulpes did some bad things. And while this video is not talking about those bad things, I don't want you to think I'm excusing what she did. I'll leave some videos about the situation in the description if you're actually interested. Until then, however, I have been Cynthia. This has been CineBear03, talking about a pilot made by a middle schooler. Baka baka.